You're listening to Super Power Up with multidimensional master, superpower expert, and former counterintelligence agent, Tonya Dawn Recla. If you're ready to disrupt reality, then sit down, strap in, and prepare to experience the show that proves there is no spoon.
Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, your superpower expert. And of course, I'm excited. You know, I'm always excited. I don't really talk with people I'm not excited to talk to. So that's the luxury of being free to do your own thing and being the boss of your own show. So today is no exception, folks. We have, well, I'm going to say it, an amazing guest today. She is, she's just brilliant in the sense of, and I want to be very clear about this, it's probably not what you expect, which is perfect. And on this show, obviously, you're used to that at this point in time. But we're going to talk today about expanding beyond normal. And, you know, that could take many, many, many different turns. So I want to make sure that we're clear on exactly why I feel like this is such an important topic and why at Superpower Experts, we're constantly discussing this idea of, you know, just stop trying to be normal, right? None of us are designed to be any sort of cookie cutter. So I'm not real sure where we picked up this notion of, well, actually I know exactly where we picked it up, but anyway, we don't need to dive into that right now. So the importance of truly, fully and completely and intricately understanding yourself, right? The personhood, so that we can understand ourselves at a higher level, to the soul spiritual level, so that we can access the universal cosmic soul, God, the divine, all of that fun stuff, right? So people get so confused in this because they think, you know, in the spiritual kind of woo-woo flow sense of things, like you're just supposed to surrender, right? Well, surrender is not abdication. Surrender is being very clear on where you're putting your agency. Well, you can only do that if you're also very clear on where your patterns of behavior and programs have designed you to put your agency. So if you're operating like la 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 la, right, like kind of in an ignorant, naive sense internally, then you're not in a position to say where you're getting your agency from and that, or where you're putting your agency. And so it's a really, really complex conversation that seems like it should be very simple, and it's really not. And so that's what I'm excited to talk with our guest today. Amazing Robyn is I can't even possibly do her credibility and bona fides justice, but just think like government, international CEOs, Hollywood stars, and billionaires, right? Just let that kind of circle around for a second. And she's not coming in there to, you know, read their tarot cards, right? She's doing a lot more than that in terms of the expansion and being able to read them and see them and help them understand this abstract frequency that we talk about a lot here, where we commune with the divine, where we are the divine, where we walk the world as the divine, and then reconciling all that, right? Like very concrete reality here, and here's the divine, and how do we bridge that gap? And so that's what we're talking with Amazing Robyn today about. And I'm really excited to share her with you and the synergy that happens when she and I commune. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the show, Amazing Robyn.
Hi, guys. I'm super stoked. We're going to get into some really deep and interesting subjects today. I can already tell. So let's just bring it on.
Bring it on. Well, and that's what I love about this format, is that it really is clear. Like you don't have to do a lot of the caveats where, okay, let me translate this down, because, you know, they expect this from us. And so we're happy to deliver. And the way we deliver that, of course, is our very first question is always, what are your superpowers?
Ooh. So I'm going to say, to be honest, and I don't normally talk about this so fluidly in public, but I have many different superpowers. I don't just have one or two. But the trick is once you realize you have one, you develop that, and then you seek out others. You can have them all. And that's what most people don't realize just yet. So when talking about my superpower, I want to say this, that I don't typically just use my superpowers for myself. I use them as a conduit for whoever I'm working with, my client or a group, a company, whatever it is. So in that space and in that moment, I call upon the powers of heaven, and I ask to be a conduit for their behalf, for their greater good, to see what their greatest potential is, where they're blocked, why they're blocked, how I can correct it, all of that stuff. So in that space, more superpowers will show up. and they're different every single time. So I've experienced some supernatural things different from another. Sometimes I'll hear things. Sometimes I'll get names. I mean, it's just so specific. And then other times I'm seeing, smelling, tasting. But my most specific gift that seems to be pretty consistent is that I'm a seer. I can see why someone has cancer, why it occurred, what happened to them, what they said to themselves, why they don't want to live, how we can correct it. If we can correct it, do I have permission to? Why a company is not at their full capacity, what's blocking them, what's the energy behind it, how we can correct it, all of that stuff. So I would say that that's usually my most consistent gift, if that all makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I love it. And I love what you had to say about, we can have all the superpowers. We use that lingo a lot in our construct as well, in the sense that we train people on how to utilize and receive the gift of their predisposed superpowers, but recognizing that through the divine and the abstract frequency, we have access to all of them. But because the ones that you're predisposed to, or ones that kind of come to you in certain ways, tend to have the challenges first with them, because we will learn to use these in service to the divine, come hell or high water. You might as well neutralize those and use them as the gift first, is kind of our philosophy. Like, work smarter, not harder.
Right.
But you said something really fascinating that I think creates a lot of confusion for practitioners and for people when they're awakening, and then they feel guided to use their gifts in service to other people. And you were talking about permission. And I know people have all kinds of different theories on this. And so you said you ask permission, and who are you asking that of?
I ask God directly. I have just, through working with thousands of clients, from people from mental stuff to actual physical cancer, sometimes I have permission to heal things. And, there's sometimes where I always, let me give you an example. I'm all about examples, right? So if a client comes to me and they have cancer, the very first thing I do is use kinesiology and my spiritual gifts to test if they even want to live. Consciously, they'll always tell me they want to live, that they're trying to fight this. But I'm asking subconsciously and in the energetic space, which could be, very dimensional. And so I'm asking, do they want to live? And I would say 98% of the time, it's always no. Mm-hmm. And so then I have to go and ask, is this something that I can shift to change? Where did this come from? When did the moment happen when they decided they didn't want to do this anymore, that they didn't want to live? So then I can scan someone's timeline and feel the exact moment. I know, and I can see it. They got raped, or whatever happened to them, they were betrayed, or they were, whatever. So in that moment, I have to go in, and that's when I ask the divine, is it appropriate for me to heal this? Do I have full permission on all levels to go in here into the quantum field and upload the right frequencies, the right healings, the right everything? And sometimes it's no, and you have to be okay with that. So, but sometimes yes.
I'm so glad you said that, because I'm going to geek out on this for a second, because the personhood concept is such a tricky one, right? And so people are like, well, I have rights and I have free will and I have all this stuff. And it's like, well, I don't know how to break it to you, but you really don't have free will. You had free will at some point in time. And the aspect of you that you typically associate with really has no free will. Like, it's really trapped. And until we can see that, then you're right in the sense that you can't really ask a person a question if they don't have any idea where their agency is. And so it's kind of like asking somebody, well, if you didn't need to make money, what would you do? And it's like, nobody can fathom that. Right? It doesn't matter how they respond. It's always based in, well, what's the most enjoyable way I could make money? Right? And it always goes back to that. Until people are truly free of that construct, they can't respond to that question as the divine would invite them to respond. They just can't, right? It's just impossible. They have to trace it back to survivability until they're done with that, torturous prison. And so when we ask people, do I have permission to heal you? Like, yeah, heal me, right? Well, what are they really looking for? They're looking for relief. And a lot of times, from the higher aspect, that equates to death. But you're right. It seems too selfish, defeatist, whatever the case may be, to voice that. And I found the same thing. I'm not quite as formalized in that process as you are. However, I have found myself at the deathbed of various people and saw the exact same thing. Was like, ultimately, they're not interested in living, yet their words are saying something else. And a lot of times it
Right.
has to do with our obligatory relationships.
Right.
And I had a really intense experience last year that had us in the ER quite a few times. And it's just one of those, fun adventures we get to go on. And I remember looking at my husband and I stared him in the face. And I said, I know what it is you want me to do, and I can't give you that right now. But I understand and I feel you and I appreciate it, but this isn't what you think it is. And just had to be very clear because, I mean, even 12 years ago when we met, I was very clear with them, like, this is what I'm doing and nothing's going to veer me off track. I'm happy to walk beside you as long as we're able. And I'd love the challenge of seeing if we can entwine that and walk toward oneness together, but that's the mission. That's what I'm doing. And nothing will veer me off course. I may falter, quite a few times, but that's what's happening here. And so in light of that, if you're in it for the journey, then everything has to be run through that filter. And we can't look at death as being this horrible thing.
No.
But that takes a lot of expansion, if you will, right? We're talking about expanding beyond the normal. And so it's beyond the death conversation. It's beyond the disease conversation. It's beyond the body experience. It's beyond all of that. And, so it's challenging for some people to be able to fathom that.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough. I mean, especially, when it's a child. I've had to work, cases where it's a kid and I didn't have permission. And it wasn't necessarily like from the divine, but it was just the full orchestrated illusion with the parents, everything. Some people won't do what it takes, and it takes work, and it's not just a quick fix. Sometimes it is. Every so often it is a quick fix. But a lot of times it's a whole unit of suffering when it's a child. It's the parents, it's so much stuff. And when you see that everybody's not a willing participant, energetically, spiritually, mentally, physically, subconsciously, all of that, it just can't take place. And those hands down are the most devastating. But you end up seeing such great miracles and understanding and development that takes place after, though.
Well, and that's what I was going to challenge you on a little bit, is like, is it really devastating? Like, it's devastating through a filter, and that filter requires that we all make the assumption that we're motivated by the same things and that the end goal is what we think it is. And it's never what most people think it is. It's in service to the larger tapestry. And when you can hit that vantage point, there's nothing devastating, right? It just is. It's like, it's beautiful.
That's
truly.
True. That's true. When you've done the work and you're on that level of development, yes, absolutely. But even for people that have done development or are awakening to their spiritual gifts, this is a very difficult thing when you're talking about with children. But most people aren't at that level. And even if they are, going through an experience like that brings them right back to the very lowest frequency possible. It tries and tests everything. It's the most refining process.
Yeah, it's coming out one way or the other.
Yeah.
You're going to see
it's a roller coaster. So it's hard for someone to hold that space and to hold the knowledge, to hold the frequency, to hold the faith in situations like that, whether it's a child or just personal stuff. I mean, that's just how it works.
For sure. Well, obviously, folks, we have a lot to discuss. We're going to need to take a break. But before we do, Robyn, where can people go to find out more about you?
Well, thanks for asking. So I have a website of www.amazingrobyn.com, but it's Robyn with the Y. That's where most people get a little lost. So Robyn with the Y, AmazingRobyn.com.
Beautiful. Well, we are talking with Amazing Robyn today, and we're talking about expanding beyond normal. When we come back, I'm going to ask you about Amazing Robyn and how that came to be and what that's all about for you. So folks, stay with us and we'll dive even more deeply and learn how you can start walking yourself toward a very, very different perspective, even now. So stay tuned and we'll be right back. Hello, everyone. This is Tonya Dawn Recla, Executive Director of Superpower Experts. And we want to thank each of you for making Superpower Up the #1 podcast network for personal development and spiritual growth. because people like you have the courage to say that mindfulness, healthy living, disrupting reality, the pursuit of consciousness, responsible entrepreneurship, and radical parenting matter. We now amass over 1 million downloads monthly in more than 90 countries. Our numbers keep growing because there are far more people willing to live divergently than mass media wants to acknowledge. For you, the change makers, the light bearers, the way showers, we say thank you. If you're ready to take the next step in your evolution, go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the Superpower quiz. And as Tonya Recla, our youngest podcaster, likes to remind us, remember, we all have superpowers and we can change the world. All right, we're back. You're listening to the Superpower Up Network. This is the Disrupt Reality series that I'm very excited about. And we've been talking with Amazing Robyn about expanding beyond normal. And before the break, we hit on, well, goodness, all kinds of fun stuff around having all the superpowers and you know, how you really seek permission and who we're seeking permission from when we move into healing modalities. And we learned that Amazing Robyn has a website, AmazingRobyn.com. And so, you know, that's a little unusual that you'd be walking around calling yourself Amazing Robyn. How did that come to be?
It's funny. I now introduce myself that way, and it causes such a reaction in people. Either it's about my ego or they think it's kind of funny, right? So none of the above. I think that we're all amazing. I don't think there's anything special about me. I think everybody equally has the same amount of gifts and abilities that I have. So like at our retreats at the end, we're all amazing and we introduce ourselves that way. But through the years, people after they would work with me, they kind of branded me that way. And they'd be like, oh, you got to meet Robyn. She's amazing. You know, Amazing Robyn. And so I just kind of got branded that way. And then I just thought it was kind of cute. It also made people remember me well. So, but it's not about ego whatsoever.
I love it. Well, it's funny because we battled the same thing when we got the guidance for the whole superpower thing. And I'm like, no, right? I was never, ever into that paradigm, not really keen on it. And then, of course, the messaging was so clear that it really is a brand designed for mass consumption. Right. And then, of course, the expert thing. And so, you know, we laugh because that's our model. Our model's all collaborative and everything else. But it is based on the idea that we're all experts or have the potentiality to associate with that aspect of ourselves if we so choose. And so it's a great example of when you look at something from one frequency lens, it means this. And when you look at something from another frequency lens, it means something totally different. You're reminding me, I remember when I first met Gary Douglas from Access Consciousness, and the place that I was sitting in at that time was still like that discerning mind, you know? And I remember like, well, what do you mean by conscious? Like, I just couldn't get over, like, I couldn't even really accept or hear or adopt anything that they were talking about because I wasn't sure which box to put them in. Like, do I want to follow this? Do I want to believe in this? Do I want to entertain this? Right. That kind of threat analysis, if you will. And so I remember like having the audacity to walk up to me like, well, how do you define consciousness? Right. And the look that he gave me was just like, huh? Like just like, don't bother. It was not impolite, but I got the message in the sense of like, wow, I'm totally off base on this. And, you know, of course, fast forward years later when I've had him on the show and I'm like, let me atone for something right here. Like, not that he lost any sleep over it, but it was like, I could just clearly see what happens when we're not in trust and we're not in faith. And when we operate, you know, most people think they make decisions from their mind, and that's their experience of it. And when you can help people see like it's done, like it's already happened, like what are you going to experience of it? And at least in my estimation, the only thing we really have choice over is just how painful do we want to make the process, right? How beautiful do we want it to be and how painful? Because when we set out to control the details, you know, that's coming from a very specific personhood aspect of us. When we are able to relax into the overarching kind of perspective on it, it's like that's where you walk on water, right? That's where you're in the world, but not of it. That's where you're able to be. And it's not that the chaos calms down at all. It's just you're not immersed in it. You're kind of like observing, you're above it. And even when your body's in the middle of it, it's like that doesn't have to be your experience. And so I think it's really important that we normalize things like that. And I liken your Amazing Robyn kind of concept to that, in the sense of like, so what? Like get over it and let's embrace the brilliance and the miraculous in it, instead of sitting there and, you know, breaking down or tearing apart potential threat in it, if you will.
Yeah. I think that there's so many out there that are super freaky cool. And, the society and this worldly image that we need to, keep it on the down low.
Yeah.
I just think it's BS. And I think we should really claim our divine awesomeness. And so I do. And I just think it took me a long time. I thought it was kind of funny at first, but now I truly feel that way about myself. And it took me a long time, but not just about myself, about everybody. I really see the potential of everybody if they allow me to, of course. But there's some people that are just amazingly powerful, and they're just sleeping giants. And the whole work of what I do is just amazing. So that's really where it comes from.
So you just said something. You said, if they allow me to. I want to dissect that also. Like, what would be an example of where somebody or something would prohibit you from seeing their divine brilliance?
Okay, that's a great question. There's a lot of people who are very, they've been hurt a lot. They're very protected. People who have suffered a lot of abuse, that ends up becoming kind of their identity, but then they create this atmosphere in their energetic field where they think that they don't want people to see inside of them, to see how damaged they are or whatever.
Does that prohibit your seeing?
Yeah, I can. It's inappropriate for me to just take a look when people aren't giving me permission. But then there are people who, like, say I go to a grocery store and they're just standing next to me, and I know the reason why she has cancer is because of self-hatred and how much she hates on herself daily. And, then there are people who are I've noticed with very strong, independent women, and men as well, that they have this kind of persona, like they're very protected. They do not give permission for people to just read them. And so I don't, there's just a big difference. So even when I'm reading someone or I work with someone, so an average client, let's just say they come to me, the only thing that I know about them is their name. I don't allow people to tell me anything about them. I ask their name and I ask for their permission. But even when I'm in there, they're only giving me permission on certain levels. And then when I get in a little bit deeper, I ask them again, are you willing to allow me to see you or see your heart or see this on all levels, all dimensions, all time, all space, known and unknown to you? And that's when I get into a whole different level of healing. So it's just you have to meet people where they're at. It's not appropriate. Like, I'll go to events and there'll be like some woo-woo psychic or medium or whatever, and they're just like regurgitating it out to everybody. And I think it's highly inappropriate. And first of all, you don't know where that person's at. You don't know what they're willing to receive, and you're doing it for your ego. You're doing it to show your worth and value to the world, like, ooh, look what I can do. And it comes off that way. And sometimes you can really create a lot of damage. And I just don't think it's appropriate when you've never asked for permission. So that's a big thing for me.
That's really fascinating. So why I'm fascinated with this is because I 100% agree with what you were saying there towards the end, that there is a responsibility to these gifts, and I have seen them wielded in really inappropriate manners. But I've never had the experience of not being able to see the divine brilliance in everyone. And so it's interesting to me. I think that possibly what it connects into is different. How I'm seeing it is like there's layers. Mm-hmm. So it feels to me, and you can just run this through your stuff. It feels to me like the work that you're doing exists in a very specific, like it crosses all things, of course, but where you're impacting has a kind of specific feel to it. And then what I'm seeing is, like, I'm not always called in to do anything about it. Like, right. Kind of the way that I reconciled it early on. And again, a lot of praying, a lot of connecting. And folks, this is why these conversations are so important. Like, I don't do things like Robyn does them, right? My guidance is not Robyn's guidance. And so be really careful what you're taking on that may not be for you. Because if I held that belief, I can name at least 10 situations where I would have been operating outside of the bounds of what I'm guided to do if I sought permission from the personhood. And I don't meet people where they're at ever. I always hold the higher frequency and speak to that and with that, almost to the confusion of the person. And that's just the work. And so it's really fascinating to, and I encourage all of you to use a process of introspection. So listen, right? Listen is Robyn speaking, and say, okay, there's nothing in what Robyn's saying that sounds not congruent for her and real and true and everything else and what she's doing. Take it in and go, okay, is there information in this for me? Is there guidance for me? Is there something I should be looking at a little bit differently? Am I overstepping bounds? Like, where is this hitting me in my body? Where am I feeling this? And then go, okay. And we don't skip that step and just go to, we just do things differently. Like, there's value in the introspection, but always take it back to what's yours. And my experience is very different. Like, I always only see people in their highest, and I'm only ever called to commune with them in a lower space if that's where they're stuck, right? But yeah, I never ask permission. For me, it's like the
I think we're talking about two different things.
That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah. So, there's a difference between me seeing someone's divine brilliance, like you're talking about that. Yes, that's always able to be seen. But I'm talking about like when people are being read, like I have the ability where I can read what they're crying out for at night, what they're yearning for. I mean, what their deepest desire, what they're crying for, what they're blocked in, their sadness, all of that stuff. So there's different levels to that, and there's different capabilities to read that. I could just sit there and tap into people. Most of the time people are wearing that stuff on their sleeve, and I can just do that. But it's not appropriate for me to just tap in and know everybody's kind of baggage unless they're really seeking that out. But also, it protects me, because when I am tapping into people like that and I see all of those things, it starts to pull me from what I'm doing. I cannot just take a look and see what someone's yearning for and not call upon it for them, not sit there and pray intensely for them, not, give them everything of my energy to give them the things that they desire and need, or to change their frequency, whatever it is. So it's hard. So I can get pulled in that. I can be in a room with 300 people, for speaking, and then I'm focused on the one. And so I try to really, I don't give away my gifts anyway, for people who aren't seeking them out. And so, or seeking out healing, seeking out change. It's like, it's a manipulation, and there's good and bad manipulations. And so just because somebody's sick at church, let's just say, I see this a lot, like somebody's sick at church and you want to bring them a meal. And a lot of times there's a good manipulation in that. Like, you want them to think, oh, I'm a great cook. They're going to think I'm righteous. They're going to think I'm such a good Christian, things like that. So I'm always looking to see, what is it that's behind this? Am I truly coming from the right intention? And I have to evaluate, and that takes time. Do you see what I'm saying? So just on a fly-by walk at an event, when I'm next to someone, I try not to just go deep into someone like that. I always see someone's beauty and their divine love and all of who they are to God. Absolutely. But
I think I misunderstood something you said, because I knew that I felt and resonate with I thought you said that you see their divine gifts and brilliance when they let you, and that's what threw me off. So perhaps I just misunderstood.
Yeah. And then, what was I going to say? Sometimes people are just seeking, and they kind of put off that frequency where right away. But then there are some times where the spirit, the divine spirit prompts you to do things, to say things, to approach or whatever. And I never deny that anymore. I used to. I mean, that's a scary thing when that starts happening. But you learn over time to be obedient, because incredible things happen when that's the case.
Well, and for everyone listening, and of course, remember, this happens differently for everybody. And for me, the permission thing went out the window the second I fully committed to doing this work. And very clearly my guidance was if they find you, then there's resonance there. And so I don't go looking for them. In fact, I was hyper resistant early on in that practice. And now it's almost as though and again, I equate it to oneness, right? When you're operating in that space, then everything's just clear, right? Like the normal, quote unquote, right? Those rules don't apply anymore because you're not dealing with people. You're dealing with their higher aspect. And then obviously in the integration, the embodiment, and the real work comes into dealing with the people. But we have a lot of amazing coaches and practitioners who do most of the integrative work with our folks. So I have the luxurious position of just being able to see everybody's divine brilliance and relishing in that until I'm called into deeper work with them. But it's not very often anymore. That's kind of interesting. You're kind of taking me back. That's pretty, I just wasn't going to stay there. My work was something different. And so, but listen, folks, listen to this. Like, to me, these conversations don't happen enough where people are willing to say, oh, like, that's not really how I interpreted that. Like, that's not my practice. Why would you be getting different guidance? Like, why is this working? And it's so incredibly important that we stop putting ourselves in these boxes and expect ourselves to fit. They're not going to fit. And the boxes typically are designed to keep us feeling some sort of safety. But again, it's a false sense of security. Let's dive really quickly, because I know that one of the more interesting intersections you and I have is our government experiences. And so I want to ask you, or I'm going to ask you about that. My experience with it was, as you all know, is the counter intel kind of espionage arena. And with that, we worked with some of the first remote viewers. And so we know how the government works with things that, perhaps it's not always willing to admit. And so what was your experience with that?
Well, I became kind of a doom and gloom expert, unfortunately. It's like I got branded as the doom and gloom girl, but for years, just because I'm spiritually gifted doesn't mean that I don't do the work. I'm, well studied, and I study a lot of different scriptures, mixing scriptures, just deeper doctrines, all the way from, Native American to Mayan traditions and culture. And, there's everything that I can get my hands on. And so I became kind of this expert when it came to, the second coming or the Mayan calendar, the apocalypse, 2012, that was a huge thing, right? And so people would call me in, governments would call me in to help them prepare for catastrophic events. And so because I'm a seer, I can see and test what they need to prepare for. So typically the way I see it is I am not getting so much different information than you're getting. I'm just hearing it a little bit louder than you because I've developed that skill set. So I will hear what you're already getting and you're just not paying attention to. And so I pull that information from them, from an individual, from a group, or from a government, or whatever the task is, and see what they're not seeing or hearing. And so I did a lot of survival communities, bunkers, off-grid kind of systems, things like that, firearm survival training for individuals, for families, for organizations, for churches, for governments. And so I've worked on just really large projects for that, preparing, coming up with worst case scenarios, and then training them for that. So that was a big thing for me, is I wouldn't just tell them, but we would provide training for those scenarios. And the cool thing about that is, even though that had a lot of doom and gloom to it, the more you train people and the more you prepare them for those things, the fear goes away. And then the frequency changes, and then they can focus on, the good side of things. The way I tell people is, look, if there's like a 10-point catastrophic earthquake, then that means there's a 10-point catastrophic, beautiful miracle that's life-changing, life-altering, and world-altering. So there's amazing things that are all happening at the same. There's complete yin-yang opposition in those things. So, but nobody really wanted to focus on the cool stuff, on the good stuff.
Shocking.
Right. So I became that doom and gloom kind of person because that's all people got fixated on for years.
Oh,
and so I was featured all around the world in Discovery and National Geographic. I've done so many films about 2012 or the Mayan calendar and things like that. But, those things get taken out of context. And so I just decided that I wouldn't do it anymore. There's a very low frequency in that. It doesn't facilitate healing and awareness and awakening and divine. There's a lot of fear and preparation of that. So I totally got out of that industry and got out of doing it for the private sector and went into the public. Now I typically work with CEOs, people who have really, in most of the world's eyes have had success, but they're still not at a level of completeness and happiness for no damn reason. That's what I thought. To me, that's success. When you're happy for no damn reason, I
love it.
Perfect. And so that's really my agenda now. And that's what I like to focus on. So, and developing other spiritual gifts.
I'm dying over here because God is not without a sense of humor. And I'm like, really? Like, my first book was called Watch, Assess, React, War. It's the ultimate guide to personal power and safety. And I talked about shooter situation. Basically, I was talking about my experience as a female counter-intel agent, right? And then every fun thing that goes along with that. And the original kind of, my first kind of entrepreneurial outreach was in exactly what you're talking about. Not to the extent you're talking about. I was in it for a very short time, but discovered everything that you're speaking to, which is like, okay, can do this. And then Justin and I together discovered that in when we first rolled out the risk mitigation due diligence kind of thing, and we got referred out a lot for the just the this person did this to me, like the vendettas and all that stuff, and or wanting to surveil people just because we're nosy, or the security, like I'm not safe in the world kind of perspective. And it's good. I mean, it was good to traverse that. Like, we learned a lot. It's a lot that we're able to apply now at a much higher frequency. But I'm just dying. I'm like, of course, it's I love the parallels. I love the symbolism, and they never cease to amaze me. And to me, it's just all indicative of the beautiful, brilliant design that we're a part of, and so it's, folks, part of this conversation is how do most of you have some sort of background in a very kind of traditional, linear, more masculine energy in industry that, whether it be academia or corporate or government, like that's most of us who find ourselves attracted to these concepts have some sort of background in that, and then got called into using that very foundational, stable kind of dictated personas in skill sets in service to something else. And sometimes bridging that is challenging. And so a lot of what Robyn does is translate that, right? How do you do that? Because that's what she did, right? She modeled that. And so I love your examples of it's great to have success in a certain paradigm, but that's not all there is. And I find too, the work that we all do, the more people are standing at that threshold and they don't understand why kind of money's going away, or success is going away, or relationships are going away, or health is going away. Like, things just aren't quite working like they did before. No. And if we don't understand this continued evolution that we're a part of, then it is really unnerving. And of course, the collective carries all of the crucifixion stories and drowning stories and burned at the stake stories and all of the things that happen if you dare to live as the divine here. And then we think, oh my gosh, like, that's great. Like, but I'm wealthy now, and if I do this work for the divine, I'm going to have to go broke, right? Because we can't have money and do the divine's work. Like, that's just not going to happen. And so we have all of these ridiculous notions in our collective conscious, and we don't realize how much they govern our choices, or if you can call them choices, but at least what our perspective is on things and what our motivations are. And so it's really important that you stop and get clear on what's driving you. Like, what is actually calling the shots? What voice are you listening to? Is it an internal voice, or is it where you access spirit and are able to hear the divine, hear God dictate, what comes next for you? I highly recommend that practice, folks, because over time, it gets just downright painful to exist anyway else. And I said on one of the shows here recently, resistance used to be futile. Now it's just painful. And it's like, I just don't bother. Like, it's just not worth it. And it's not what you think it is. Like, it's not abdication. It's not weak, right? It's the most active thing, the most powerful existence. But you just get really clear on the fact that it's not you, right? You're part of a much bigger whole, and that whole is exponentially more powerful. And when you can kind of grip that, and I know it's confusing, like on one side of the coin, it's very confusing. And then as soon as you cross that threshold, it's like, oh, that makes total sense, but it makes no sense, right, from the other filter.
Yeah.
So Robyn, I promised folks that they'd have a way to kind of implement this stuff. So based on all that confusion that I just like bleh, all over the place, what can people do to start making sense of that for themselves and walking themselves toward this position that you hold?
Well, I'm glad I was like, let's talk about this. So there's a lot in there. And I think right now, a lot of people are starting to awaken. And so here's the very first thing to start with is that, do you have the desire? Is there something in you that secretly desires to have spiritual gifts? Is there a desire in you that secretly wants to like talk face to face with God, or put your hands on something and heal it? Or, those desires that you're not really talking about or sharing with the world because it's not currently you, or it is you and you want to take it to another level, whatever it is. But it all starts there, to having the desire. If it wasn't already in you, then you wouldn't have the desire, even if it was secretly. And so if the desire is there, it's because it's already been implanted. It has a lot to do with who you were before you even came to this world, and who this whole divine journey is in the eternities. So first, you need to seek it out. And how you can seek it out is that's what I really want to talk about in a little bit more detail. Is first, people need to figure out where their hot spot is, okay? If we were to ask 50 people in a room where all of their dead zones are when they're driving home on their cell phone, every single one of them would tell us exactly where that spot is. If they're on a conference call, they know they're going to drop off on that call, okay? Everybody knows where those spots are, but nobody can tell me where their personal dead zones are and their hot spots are. Meaning, where are they the most spiritually connected, and where are they dropping off? What kind of environment, situation, mental, all of it, they're not paying attention to all of it. So for me, I go on like spiritual quests. I go into the woods. I go and I fast, and I go camping by myself. I go to high peaks, and I just have conversations with God on top of mountains sometimes. But that's if I'm really looking for something supernatural. Other times I'm just talking to the divine, like I'm talking to you, and I'm seeking it out. I'm saying, hey, look, I have this desire to heal things. I have this desire to be prophetic. I have the desire to tell someone what I saw about them. Can you tell me how to use this? Show me how to use this. Show me what it is. Show me how you want me to use this. I mean, it's about asking the right questions so you get the right answers, and really seeking it out. And if you don't even know if God's real, that's totally cool too. So then you just go to God and say, hey, I don't even know if you're real. Like, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are, where you are. I don't know about any of this stuff. But if you are, I want to know.
Yeah,
and I don't know how
me.
that's going to come. So just show me, and just really have it out and have a real conversation with all of the energetic quantum fields that are around you and see what shows up. And then you got to start testing it. Did that feel good? Did that not feel good? Did I feel highly connected when I did that? Did I feel like I was in a dead zone? And start paying attention to those telltale signs. And then another way I always recommend to everybody is to learn when they're very first starting out in this kind of work and developing those hot spots or getting revelation, downloads, promptings, all of that stuff, is to learn how to muscle test in a way that works for them. And muscle testing by far can teach people how to get confirmation of things that they're experiencing. And so like in retreats, we all muscle test one way, and then I pair people in threes. So one person's being the facilitator, the healer with all of their gifts. One person is being worked on, and then the other person is confirming that they're both dead on with muscle testing. So you get constant confirmation that you're being led and guided in the right way. And so it helps to build people's confirmations, their confidence in their gifts. And so that's kind of like using training wheels on a bicycle. It's a good way to learn. And then eventually you'll learn that you don't really need those tools. You're just in this frequency. You're in the knowing with God. You're just in the space where you don't have to go to a secret closet, get on your knees or anything like that. You're already connected. But through the process, you have to really experiment with God. You have to experiment with the energy, experiment with the quantum field, experiment with the universe, and what all of that means. And none of it's wrong. All of it's good. All of it's going to lead you to where you need to be, but you have to seek it out from that desire.
Yeah, this is not a passive game, folks. Nobody just accidentally stumbles onto this stuff. Like, you really have to want to do it. And there aren't shortcuts, but you certainly can be supported, and you can be guided, you can be held, you can be, we can make it more smooth, we can make it more enjoyable. Like, there's all kinds of things that you can get support in, but it's your path. You have to walk it. Nothing's going to veer you off of it forever, but you might take some detours and then, fall on some rocks and all kinds of other stuff. But that's the inevitability of it all. And I describe it as being in a constant state of prayer. And you don't just happen into that, folks. I mean, you might during the awakening phase, it's like all of a sudden now all you can hear is God's voice. But trust me when I say that you will have to work through everything that's stored inside of you, all of the program, everything, because anything that's not that can't stand. That's the squeezing through the eye of the needle, and you can't take it with you. Like, everything goes. Anything that you think is something that you depend upon for your safety, your security, your sanctuary, your peace, your happiness, all of it comes under scrutiny, to include our spousal relationships, our child relationship, everything. And it's, when you're faced with that, we talked earlier in the show about, the death of a child and everything else. Like, nothing is so special that it's outside the bounds of this journey, and everything that we pride ourselves on in our personhood and in the world has to be brought up into that divine frequency and seen through different eyes. And ultimately, you see, it's all fleeting and it all passes. But that doesn't mean we can't enjoy it, right? I have a remarkable existence. I'm happy for no damn good reason at all the time. And it's this availability of that bliss that we all dream about. But really, do you have the courage to step into it? And what you're losing,
you can get it.
And what you're losing along the way is the attachments. And so I love what you said about God. Do you exist? Do you exist? And so even with belief, do what Robyn's talking about. Just say, I don't know that I believe that. Sounds fun. I'd kind of like to believe it. And so just stop for a moment. And if talking to the divine or talking to God is too much for you, imagine like talk to your higher self for a little bit, right? Have a segue. If you like angels, talk to an angel. If you like whatever it is that kind of gets you into a different space and gets you closer to that, then just expand as far as you can. And don't go out of your comfort zone for too long. Like if you venture into that and it's like, oh my gosh, this is kind of cool, but oh my gosh, it's kind of scary. And oh my gosh, I was like, be gentle with yourselves, folks. Be loving. Like, we're talking about complete disruption of your reality to the point where when you get real comfortable with things like reworking themselves in front of your eyes, staring at something and denying its existence. Like, but that doesn't have to happen right now. There's a reason why we wake up slowly, and you're given what you're able to hold. And sometimes it's abrasive. Sometimes there is friction, but sit in the friction, sit in the abrasion, and be willing to process through it. And these techniques that Robyn's outlined, I think, are just brilliant. I love the idea of like, I don't know if God exists. I don't even know what that means, but how are you going to know if you don't even entertain it and start opening yourselves up to that?
Yeah, we need to keep it real and get out of the traditions and the cultures of things and just have a real honest conversations with ourselves out loud, and then invite, if there is the divine, then say, hey, if you're there, if you're real, then talk about it. I was telling my husband, like, if I was to, go out and have an affair, I would come home immediately and talk to God about it. Like, there would be no secrets. I am just completely honest and bold about who I am. And not that I have affairs. I'm just saying, most of the time that people, when they screw up, they instantly want to hide. They feel like they cannot be that honest with things. And so, to me, that's the worst case scenario. And I would come home and immediately talk to God about it. But if I'm also having a faith crisis, then I'm honest about that too. If I'm pissed at God, I'm honest about that, and I'm having it out, and I have those conversations. And I think too often we're just kind of thinking the things and then never really getting it out of us verbally and getting it out of our minds and in our fields.
Well, it's a relationship for sure, and you have to be willing to work it. One of the best pieces of advice Justin and I got in our premarital counseling was that marriage is a verb. And the same is true with your relationship with God or the divine or whoever it is that you resonate with. You have to work it. You have to be willing to have it be an active principle in your existence. Otherwise, you're not going to get the fruits of that. Robyn, you and I could talk for eons probably about these topics and everything else. I'm sure that we'll have many more conversations, but we do need to wrap up. So let's remind people again where they can go to find out more about you.
So my website is amazingrobyn.com. And if you guys go onto my website, I will have a free offer where people can get a free intuitive call, and I'll tell you where there's something where that's really blocked, where something isn't healed, and what's keeping you from your potential. I'm happy to do that for people that are especially in this like-minded market from this type of podcast. I just love that. So let me know how I can help you with anything that you're seeking out at this time.
Beautiful. Yeah, if that resonates with you, if you're listening to Robyn, you're like getting lit up by this, that's an indicator, folks. If you're just, I don't really know, and I'm a little curious, and I'm not really sure, do it. Follow your curiosities. Those are indicators and signs. Go to her site, take her up on her offer, because you don't know what you don't know, folks, and start opening yourselves up, right? Expanding beyond normal. You have to start somewhere, and she's a safe space for you to start that with. So have some courage, venture into that. And I know you all are. I do. I know you're trying, like we know you're listening. We know it matters. And we appreciate you so much for having the courage, even to just listen to something like a crazy superpower up network where we're talking about superpowers and God and all kinds of whatnot. And, it cracks me up, and it's so yummy and delightful. And my wish for you all, if I could be so bold and egotistical, is that you would just relax into that also and have fun and explore and recognize that fear comes from the grips that we have on what we think are keeping us safe. And when we start to tear those away, real magic happens. So Robyn, I can't thank you enough. Big, big, big hug and loves to you. Loves and hugs and loves and all plural. You can have it all. And really, really appreciate you sharing your brilliance on this show. I feel like, do you have a last minute kind of thing that you wanted to add? I feel like I cut you off short there. Would you like to say something else?
No, I mean, if there's anything I could ever say, is just to seek out your gifts, and you can have them all. Definitely.
Beautiful, beautiful. Great parting words. All right, folks, you know the drill. Go out, uncover your superpowers, and change the world. Take care, everyone. Till next time.
Are you ready to discover your superpowers? Go now to superpowerexperts.com and take the superpower quiz today.